Welcome to the Innovation Conversation, a podcast about innovators, both in business and real life. Hosted by myself, Ricardo Pascual, and Harry McDonough.
This podcast is sponsored by OpenExperts.com. OpenExperts is a place to go if you're looking to talk with top experts from around the world. That is open-experts.com. This podcast is also sponsored by startupnetworks.co.uk. Startup Networks, it's an online forum where you can find all the resources you need to run your startup. From grants to investors to tips and tricks on how to be successful in your startup.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Conversation. Today we are joined by Stefano Calvetti, a leadership coach and an overall great guy. Stefano, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ricardo. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Stefano, would you like to introduce yourself for the audience?
Okay, yes, it's going to be long. No, just kidding. I'll cut it short. As you say, I'm a leadership coach, and I have built my experience in leadership, not just with coaching and training, but also with kind of 30 years in the Navy, in the Italian Navy as an officer. So I have had many different experiences in my life, in war areas, in more peaceful areas, in international stuff, in political level stuff. I was the deputy military assistant to the prime minister, and so on and so forth. So I must say that I'm lucky enough to have seen leadership and experienced leadership in many, many situations. Also, I am the co-founder of a startup too. So just to add something to my curriculum.
Interesting. Now, you have a very, we actually got the opportunity to talk a lot before this podcast. You have a very interesting career and a very interesting life. So you started off in the Italian Navy, right? And then you transitioned over to the civilian life where you became a coach and a leadership coach. How was that process? I mean, how do you go from being, in charge of a ship to going in, helping people to actually lead the way? How does that go?
Well, it was an interesting passage, because I want to say, I don't want to brag, but I had a salary that was, every month was coming, no doubt. I had a career. I was pretty much on path to be admiral and so on and so forth. And yet, what I felt was kind of disalignment between what I wanted in life and what the Navy was going to give me. So I felt I was not in synchrony anymore with the environment, with the people.
Mm-hmm.
I was, and that's something that I really didn't like. So I understood that I needed a change. And talking to my wife, she pointed out, the fact that I like talking to people, engaging with them. I like seeing people grow. I like contributing to their growth. And so she said, well, why don't you become a coach? And I explored the possibility. I've learned what being a coach means. And I said, yes, I want to do that. And that's how I started. I have, as I mentioned, I would say, a pretty wide experience on leadership. And I'm bringing all of this with the coaching tools that the CTI, is the Coactive Training Institute, provided me. And I think it's a great match, it's a perfect match. So that's why I started this new activity. It's really helping others. I love talking to, especially entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, people who are curious about leadership, who are willing to prove themselves and to become a better leader than they are, even if they are seasoned leaders, of course, not necessarily young.
Do you find a lot of similarities between the skill set you need as a military leader and the skill set you need as a business leader?
There are similarities. Of course, there are similarities. The context can be completely different. Of course, in the military, there is a lot. It's a very structured organization. Hierarchy is a must. Discipline is enforced in any possible way. Sometimes it's not a pleasant way. But there is a lot that you can bring to the business world. And actually, for example, working under pressure, we are used to work under a lot of pressure, and sometimes it's not just the deadline, the looming deadline for an important paper. Sometimes it's really working and having to make decisions in a situation where whatever you decide can be a matter of life or death. So you are
Hmm.
on the front line. So I would say working under pressure in every condition, working for long times when you are deployed, you are away from home, and you work 24/7. There is literally, I mean, of course you sleep, but it's just what you need to get rest. And there are no holidays for sure.
Hmm.
There are no Sundays, there are no Christmas. You might take an easier day if the battle rhythm allows you that, but it's not more than that. You're still
Hmm.
working every day. It's also kind of dealing with people, being a team member other than a team leader. So the one thing that I have appreciated of the Navy is that since day one, you are fully immersed with a lot of people, your peers, people that work with you. You have one boss, and then there is the boss of the boss, and so is you learn how to establish relationship, create relationship with every each of
Hmm.
them. And if you want to have a successful team, you also learn how to build trustful, meaningful relationship with these people.
I was just wondering, what was the most stressful situation you had in the Navy? I always like to ask this story because you told me already, and I'm very happy to be able to put it again on the podcast. So, what was the most stressful situation you
Uh,
had? Because a lot of startup founders, they find themselves in quite stressful
mm.
situations, but learning from yourself, like how to deal with that, that'll be amazing.
Oh, there are. I think there are a couple of defining moments in my life. One was when I was a commanding officer of a ship, and we were deployed in the Horn of Africa, between Yemen, Somalia. It was a European-led mission to counter piracy in those waters a few years ago.
Hmm.
And well, we had a lot of problems on board. Were technical problems, engine problems, and something that, despite the maintenance and all the good work, were happening, and it was making everything hard. There was a lot of pressure from Rome, from the Navy HQ, because they want us to be as efficient as we could, and we were really struggling with. I would say I will define it as really bad luck. A lot of things happening. It's not just they were happening; it's the sequence of
Hmm.
things happening at the same time. And we also had pressure from the European command that wanted us to be at sea and patrolling and dealing with pirates, and we had to intervene on scenes and do things. So I think, was a very stressful moment for me, for the whole crew, because of course it was not just me. And what helped me a lot was to be transparent with everyone. I showed up with all my insecurities, with all my doubts, with all my, oh, I'm tired. To them, I'm tired. I cannot. I showed up as a human, and the reaction that I had from, especially from, of course, the staff that was mostly working with me, it was the senior staff of the ship, was a total understanding and support. And I remember
Hmm.
it was actually one day one of the officers came to me and said, I don't know how you can handle all of this, all this pressure, and still smile and still keep going. And that's the thing that I told him. It was like, well, because I have you. Because first of all, it's my responsibility. I cannot just lock myself in my cabin and cry and
Hmm.
bang the head on the wall. I cannot do that. I need to react. I need to react. And I have you. You are helping me a lot. So this is the team that I really look at in my experience as the best team I ever had. Not because they were better than anyone else, but because of the bond we created that is unique. And I've been on many ships.
I was just wondering, you mentioned something quite interesting, which is being transparent, but also being vulnerable. Isn't that isn't that scary, as a military leader and also as a business leader? Because we try to hide our vulnerabilities, not show them to the world. How does that even work?
Yeah, being vulnerable is demonized nowadays, and there is this idea of the strong leader that is always has the right answer to any problem and can always make the right decision. And we know very well, right? I mean, it's not, you don't need to be like old. You know that is not true. It's We are humans and we observe humans being leaders. So leading with vulnerability can be scary. It's true that we do not like to have a leader that doesn't have competence and doesn't have the behavioral characteristics that are needed to lead a team, small or big. Of
Hmm.
course, if you go to a person and ask for direction, this person is like, I don't know. And the next day, I don't know. And the third day is, I don't know. Of course, you start losing trust. However, if the same person say, I don't know, but I'm working on it, and he or she will use the tools that they have at their disposal to bring this decision to make the decision, then you will gain trust out of it. And you will see people around you, and that's what I've seen right on the ship. I've seen people around me taking ownership and feeling empowered, and they understood that we I could not function without them, and we were a team.
Hmm.
No one was essential. Everyone was important. Not even me, that was the commanding officer. I was not essential in the team. We were equally important.
I was wondering on that note, because I know you obviously have your coaching business and you interview also a lot of people. What are the traits of a good leader that you can just say, what, I've always found that people who are very good leaders, they always have these things and they're always the same thing, or maybe they change a lot. I don't know, but what are the ones you just point out straight
That's
away?
a good question because you know very well because you've been a kind guest in my podcast.
Mhm.
The first question I always ask is, "What is a good leader for you?" And the funny thing is, in the almost 50 episodes now, I have heard 50 definitions. I think
Okay.
that's great. And that's what I love. I think there are three main characteristics in a leader. The first one is self awareness. You need to know who you are. You need to know what are your strengths, your weaknesses, what are your blind spots. You need to know what is guiding you, what is fueling your actions, your life purpose. You need to know what really matters to you, and what are your values. The second thing is having a vision, and the vision means understanding where you're going as a person, as a leader with your team. And of course, you need to be able also to communicate your vision. The third characteristic is your reference system. It's like you are a ship at sea. You know where you're going, but if you don't have your North Star, your GPS, you don't know how to get there. And those are your values. And those are the things that are important to you. And you will never betray those values. You don't need, actually, I will say that you don't need, it's better not to have 100 values in your list because
Mhm.
you're not gonna
Not
respect
gonna
all of
do.
them. There is not a magic number, and I don't want to put numbers, but you don't need 100 for sure. But those are the things that you will always look at when things get tough. And
Yeah.
it can be integrity. For me, for example, is respect, and the top two is respect and creativity. That's the two things that really I keep as reference, and there are many more, of course. So those are the three components, and of course, those are the three things that will allow you to create a strategy to go from A to B.
Hmm.
And then the other thing you need is the action. You need to move the first step with your team or alone,
Yep.
depending how you're working, but you need to move the first step because you can have the best strategy in front of you. Of course, if you don't do anything, you're not going anywhere.
I was wondering on something. Now you mentioned that on the ship you don't have any breaks, right? Or you have some breaks, but you can't take a day off. And a lot of the entrepreneurs I talk to, they always tell me they're burning out. It's a very common theme to burn out. So, what advice would you give to people not to burn out? Because you actually have real life experience of being in a very stressful situation for a very long time. So, what do you tell someone don't burn out because just managing this way?
Well, that's a mistake that we all make at some point in life. You know, you think that you have all the energy and resources to keep going, and you keep going and keep going, and that's not true. So you need to create what Stephen Coven say the sharpening the saw, a system that will help you rest, not
Hmm.
to waste time, but to work better after. It's a matter of being efficient. So you cannot work 24/7. It's not true. That's you can do it maybe under particular circumstances. You can work 1 day, 2 days in a row, like 48 hours, like crazy. But what you will observe in any case that your the production level or whatever you're doing will decrease incredibly. And to do a small thing,
Hmm.
you will need a lot of energy, much more than you normally use at the beginning of this endeavor. So sharpening the saw, taking a rest is fundamental for every each of us. Doesn't matter if you are deployed in Afghanistan on a ship or you are a startup founder. You need to take time for you. And there are a few things you can do to sharpen the saw. The first one is self-care. So you need to literally sleep. There is
Hmm.
Ariana Huffington. She's obsessed with that. She was because she
Hmm.
actually there's a beautiful TED talk she held where she said you need to sleep through success. You need to really
Hmm.
take the time to bring your brain and body to rest. Otherwise, you're not gonna get there. Um, so sleep, but also being mindful. Meditation can help. Doing some activity that will give you pleasure beyond being a startup founder. I play guitar,
Hmm.
okay, and I was playing guitar before starting this conversation because I wanted to be in the moment. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is a song now that I'm intrigued by. But, so and also the other thing that you need to cultivate is your social network. Is
Hmm.
your support network. People that will help you. We being in a relationship. I'm talking about sentimental relationship, but having friends, family, having peers, having people you can confide in. Those really contribute to sharpening the soul, and they are as important as meditation, as resting. And the other thing is, of course, physical activity. You need to move. I
Hmm.
don't know how many hours you spend on a chair. And it is, actually, we are more creative if we exercise and we create endorphins. There are a few chemicals
Yeah.
that will help us. And it can be as easy as simple as a walk. And doesn't you can now there are standing desk with those treadmills. And I was listening to a
Hmm.
podcast recently with Andrew Huberman, and actually they were talking about the
Yep.
benefit of those. Even if you're still there in front of the screen, but you move. That's
Hmm.
so is a kind of win-win situation if you want. Don't exaggerate. You need to take your brain off the screen and everything else, but it helps.
Hmm. Interesting. I was just wondering. We have all the how should I frame this? We have all these stories about your time in the Navy and on the transition to business. Do people ever stop to tell you you're doing a crazy thing? did you ever have any naysayers? Because you're on the path to become an admiral. Did you listen to the naysayers? Obviously, you didn't listen to the naysayers, but how was it fighting against those naysayers? Because I'm sure it wasn't easy, right? Because you probably had a lot of friends in the Navy, and they probably told you, "What are you doing? Just stay in the Navy, set for life."
I will bring you my example in this because it's I would say it's peculiar. I made the decision before telling anyone. The only person I confided in was my wife and a couple of friends. No one else knew that I was going to leave the Navy. And the moment I actually went to my boss and I say, "Hey, sir, this is my literally." I came in the office with the
Hmm.
resignation letter. He looked at me like I was telling that the prime minister just died. No, 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 not so desperate, but it was taken by surprise, and he didn't like it at all. He made my life quite difficult for the next 3 months that we worked together. Not even more than 3 months. So it's there were people telling me, "Oh, what you're doing? As you mentioned, you have a career, you have a salary." But I already made up my mind, and I was clear on what I wanted. And that's, I think, the suggestion that I will give really to anyone. You need to clear really what you want from your life. If you're thinking about changing your career, doesn't matter if you're from the military, you're already in the business, you want to change, start something new. I don't know if maybe your own startup or joining another company. It's what you want from your life. What is important for you? What is the thing that you value the most that the current occupation is not allowing you to achieve, of course. And if
Hmm.
it's, for example, for me was, as I said, I felt, first of all, I felt misaligned from what the Navy was giving me. And I thought at some point that
Hmm.
actually the Navy was holding me back. That's the point. So for me, the freedom that I have now and the way I can help people now is completely different from what I was able to do earlier. And that's why I feel fulfilled much more than
Hmm.
I was able to fulfill myself before.
But okay, so how do you know you haven't made how do you know you're not going crazy and you're making the right decision? Because there's a lot of uncertainty when you're moving from from some certainty in your life to a complete uncertainty. And how do you know? I'm not crazy. I know what I'm doing, and this should be the path forward. Because I think that's a lot of things that actually happen with entrepreneurs, which is, I'm going to create my own business. Okay, I'm going to do this, and you deal with all the naysayers, but you have this burning desire in your mind to go and create it. But how do you deal with that? Because it's not easy, is
No,
it?
it's never easy, Ricardo. I know you know it because you went through transition in your life too, right? So
Hmm.
it's I think it's a matter of accepting the risks. There is no way you can foresee the future, what's going to happen to you. What can help is to create a kind of soft landing, as soft as you can, a support net. You can create it
Hmm.
with, of course, kind of putting extra funds away in case things go wrong, and give yourself time to rebuild something else if your endeavors don't go well. You cannot eliminate the risk, but what you need to balance is, or you risking losing if you don't change, compare what you risk doing when you change. I think that's
Hmm.
where you really understand what you want to do in your life. Yeah, and we are different, right? If some people are risk adverse, and that's okay, and probably they feel okay doing whatever they're doing, even if it's not 100% what they would like to do, and that's okay. I mean, especially if you have family, people you're responsible for, especially if there are circumstances around you that make the decision even more difficult or complex. It's fine. It's completely fine. You don't have to jump the fence absolutely 100% and just take the risk. It's a tolerance level. It's like pain. Some people are more tolerant to pain, other people are less tolerant. And if you think you can sustain the pain, and also the pain of failing, because it's not like
Yeah.
it's behind the corner every day. That's fine.
I was curious on something, from your wealth of experience. You just mentioned failure, and I was about to ask you because failure in your previous position had consequences, and sometimes the consequences will be someone's life. So, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with failure and managing that? Not only the fear of failure, but actual failure when it does happen.
Failure is the best way you can learn. As simple as it is. The thing that you have to do is, first of all, you have to disconnect from the past. Whatever happened, happened. There is no way in this world, in this universe,
Hmm.
for you to go back in time and change things, right? So living with regrets is not helpful. Is not health. That doesn't bring you health. Actually, is quite harmful for your mind. So the
Hmm.
first thing you need to understand is that, okay, I've done a mistake. So, and trying to change perspective, then trying to first of all understand what was wrong. There are lessons that you can learn, and those lessons
Hmm.
are invaluable. And unless you're persistent, you will not repeat the same mistakes. And then you need to forgive yourself for the mistakes you've done, and for
Hmm.
the consequences that you are paying, and maybe also someone else, unfortunately, might be involved. And this is the hard part, really. Forgive yourself.
Hmm.
And to forgive yourself, there are many things you can do. Once again, is try to meditate, be in the present, disconnect from the past, but also have a support net. Once again, people that can help you, people that love you, and they want you to be healthy, and will do and tell you things to support you. You need to surround you need to be surrounded by these people and talk to these people to give you energy. Sometimes you need energy from someone else. And then as soon as you can, you need to move on and move the first step away from what you've done. And there is, if I have time, and I want to tell you one small story. I never
Hmm.
failed like crashing a ship or failing a startup, not yet, and I hope I would
Hmm.
never do. Um, but was one thing that really is kind of signed the person I am today. And it happened actually not many years ago. I was commanding a ship, and during a meeting, a staff meeting, normal, we were deployed. It was a tense period, and there was one of my collaborator who raised his voice, and he was contesting what I just said, and it was fine. I mean, it was not the first time that I received a negative feedback on what I said, even if I was the commanding officer. I
Hmm.
never had the idea of being perfect as we and always right. So, but the problem was that he was very vocal, very loud, and it was so. First of all, I say, everyone, go, please. Excuses. We need to, this person and I, we kept the conversation going. The problem is that at some point
Hmm.
something snapped in me, and I started screaming with all the voice I had in my lungs. I think I don't think there was any place on the ship they could not hear me at some point. Oh man! And
Well.
then the moment I failed completely. I have disrespected the number one value, that is respect.
Hmm.
I lack respect. I was not respecting him, despite he was already harsh, and surely was not respecting me. But that's not an excuse. I completely lost my cool. I let emotions go and take control.
Hmm.
And I said, that's not going to happen anymore. But it took time for me to recover from that. I had to forgive myself. I had to really once again, admit that I'm human, I made mistakes, this was a big mistake,
Hmm.
and but there's nothing else I can do. I excuse myself with this person,
Hmm.
and we moved on.
I was curious. You mentioned an interesting story, and I was just wondering, because you have been in war scenarios, do you think there's ever room for someone to act full on? When we watch war movies, there's a lot of people always screaming and shouting and stuff like that, but they're not screaming and shouting out of loss of control. They're screaming and shouting of, this is the action that needs to be taken right now, right? Do you think there's ever room for that to happen, both in business and in the military, from your experience?
I don't think there is ever room to scream, honestly. And
Hmm.
I know it's human. Whenever we feel like we need to affirm ourselves, we might find a kind of companion in the volume of our voice, but it doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
But yes, there are probably moments in which you don't have time to listen to um, collect more information, and you need to make a decision. And that's when
Hmm.
urgency, emergency in those situations. Also, when all the team actually probably is looking at you and they expect the one voice from you and no one else.
Hmm.
So I think in a very well established team, you don't need to excuse yourself to do that. And actually, everyone, as I say, is expecting you to do that. So it's part of the mutual understanding. And that's fine. But once again, you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to scream. You never need to scream to do that. It's really the wrong way to kind of make people understand you are the leader. Sure, you are the leader. You are the CEO. You are the platoon commander. You are the ship commander. Whatever you are, you don't need to scream. That
I
doesn't
see.
make your order or your decision stronger or better.
So how important is leadership coaching for a startup
And
founder?
that's I think is fundamental. And I know that maybe startup founder listening to this podcast, they will probably not see that. So one of the things that we found when we created this our startup was actually that many startups fail because of lack of leadership skills from the founders. And leadership, is a very broad term. This will include managing the team, hiring talent, retaining talent, having good communication skills, having good self-awareness, having a good relationship with the other co-founder, if there are other co-founders. And
Hmm.
those are reasons for startup to fail. It's not just the fact that you don't have the right product for the market. It's not just the fact that you don't have investors. Actually, if you want to go in depth, some investors might
Hmm.
not give you money because they don't see a strong leader. If you are the CEO, and the CEO is the one talking to investors, right? If you're the
Yeah.
CEO and you don't show that you have the leadership skills that are required, why should I invest in you? You are going to fail. You are doomed to fail. For the same reasons, many VC, even if they invest in startups, they might decide to change CEO at some point, especially when the startup
Hmm.
is growing, because they feel that the CEO is not good enough for whatever they invested in. So I think it's fundamental, but I know because I've been talking to a lot of startup founders that is not seen as a priority. It's seen like the priority is the
Hmm.
product market fit, the priority is investors, funds, and that's where they put all their time, effort, energy, and not in themselves, not in them as leaders. And it's hard to keep a mirror in front of someone if they don't want to look at the mirror.
I was. What about when you get past that stage? What about when you build your MVP, you got product market fit, and then you're leading a team? How relevant
Oh,
is it then? Because then you have a team of 5, 10 people, maybe.
I mean, it is as fundamental as it was earlier, and now is even more urgent. Now your team is growing. Now you
Hmm.
have a company that is gaining traction and is scaling up, hopefully, and more people. You want to attract talents, right? So you need to create the right environment where a person with the right skills, is, feels like encouraged to join. You need that. You need to really understand that now is not just you working on your computer all the time, and someone else, another couple of people working with you. Now you have 5, 10, 50 people working with you, working for you, looking at you. What is more important than being the right leader? Also, because you need to understand one of the things that we struggle with a lot of people struggle with, is delegating.
Hmm.
That's another lesson learned for leaders. You need to delegate. You need to, now you have
Hmm.
a technical team, and you have a financial team, and you have a marketing team, maybe, and you need to delegate those functions
Hmm.
that probably you were all keeping on your head, on your shoulders. Now you can let it go, and that's not easy at all.
No, so I think that's always the hardest thing is letting go of your baby and putting in someone else's hands, saying, "Hey, now you take care of it." And it's like, it's not never going to be perfect, is it? So, what advice would you give to business leaders who are just starting out, and also in a later stage?
The first advice is really to get ready for whatever they're doing, and get ready means
Hmm.
start analyzing. Analyzing is probably the wrong word, but start exploring who you are. And we already mentioned the importance of self awareness. You need to know who you are. You need to know what you want. You need to know how you want things, how you want to reach your goal. You need to know what your weaknesses are. You need to know what is important for you, and much, much more. Yes, the
Hmm.
second thing is, the second strong advice is, don't get your ego get in the way. I'm sorry.
That's always the hardest thing, isn't it? Because a lot of people that build a business have a big, strong
Oh
ego.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, that's fine. It can work to some point. Maybe it can be the one of those source of energy that you have, but it's good as a proportion. Is not good as an obstacle, and it's hard to see when is becoming from an ally is becoming a saboteur. So it's
Mhm.
a subtle shift that you need to observe. And for example, we were talking about the product market fit. One of the problems is that people fall in love with the product, where they're bringing. Oh, look how beautiful is this! And since they
Mhm.
are so in love with their creation, and that's their ego talking, right? Oh, look, it's so nice. This app is perfect. They forget about the problem. And what
Mhm.
they fail to see is that whatever they have created is not solving any problem, meaning it's not going to sell.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's because their ego is holding the mirror. And that's the worst person that you can have to hold the famous mirror.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Stefano, I'm sure you read a lot. What books would you recommend to people? Which ones are your
100
favorite?
books. No, I think, well, there is one that is really the cornerstone of how I see leadership, and is the Seven Habits for Highly Successful People. I already mentioned him. The author is Stephen
Hmm.
Covey. His is a book that was written 30 plus years ago, so it's not new. But
Yeah.
man, it's everything that is there is so. I would say it's not the true is a big word. It's still, but is first of all, it's doable. It's very well
Hmm.
explained. A lot of examples, and I think it's the perfect manual for leaders in general. Another book that I highly recommend is Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Is That's probably
Hmm.
one of those books that really help you. It is very helpful, especially if you are a startup founder. You want to convey a message, right? It's a great way. And well, I don't know how many other books you want me to say. There is talking about vulnerabilities. I just actually finished Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Is the perfect example of how vulnerability
Hmm.
is not something you want to hide from others, and actually it's something you can in a way use to
Hmm.
create a strong team.
I always enjoy asking people what books they read, and I'll tell you why. Because um, everything up until that point can be faked. But when I ask about the book, everyone always gives their very honest opinion about the book because they actually read the book. So it comes from the heart normally. And getting these three books, Start with Why, Dare to Lead, and Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, is brilliant because it tells me a lot. And it also tells the audience a lot about yourself, right? Because it's just absolutely brilliant. Um, Stefano, if people want to reach out to you as we're nearing the end of the podcast, how can they do
Oh,
so?
there are many ways. I mean, I think the fastest, easiest is a simple email, stefano@masteryourc.com. Like Master in the Sea is. I took the name from Imagine Dragons song, Believer. At some point, they said,
Okay.
"You are the master of your sea," and that resonated a lot with me because of the name. Blah blah blah. That's why there's a helm on my
Yeah.
shoulders. Yeah, my shoulders. And that's probably the best way. Or you can go on the website mastererc.com, or yeah, I think that's
Hmm.
that's probably I want on LinkedIn, of course, Stefano Calvetti. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but that's I'm sure I'm the only coach.
But it
So
looks like you.
if you look for leadership coach Stefano Calvetti, then there should be many options.
Wonderful. Stefano, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ricardo. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
This podcast is also sponsored by startupnetworks.co.uk. Startup Networks, it's an online forum where you can find all the resources you need to run your startup, from grants to investors to tips and tricks on how to be successful in your startup. This podcast is sponsored by openexperts.com. Open Experts is a place to go if you're looking to talk with top experts from around the world. That is open-experts.com.